Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. Two quick announcements before we bring on our guest for today. We have our March Symposium coming up at the end of this month. Make sure you grab your tickets for that. The links will be in the chat. And we also have our HitLab Innovators Summit in person in New York in May. Scan the QR code or go to the chat for the link to that incredible event as well. And with that, we'd like to formally introduce our incredible speaker for today, Ambreen Molitor, the National Director of Product Innovation at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Ambreen, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I can't wait to learn not only a little bit more about you, but about just the incredible work that you're doing. So maybe a great place to start the conversation would be if you could just tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to take the role of a national director of product innovation, and how are you really approaching the work that you're doing within the broader organization?
Yeah, a great question. And I will try to keep this like down to 5 minutes because this could be a outlet in itself.
No worries.
But I have been at Planned Parenthood for about 7.5 years, which is a very long time for a tech nerd like myself. But you know what has kept me here is the mission. And throughout each cycle of those 7 years, there's been a new desire to meet the mission, to meet the moment. And ultimately, if I reverse back time and think about like why and how I got here, well, I got here through my network and I stayed here for the mission. And it's just been an interesting journey because a lot of what drives me here are the things that I went through in my personal journey. So in my 20s, I very much like you go down the list of all the sort of sexual and reproductive mishaps one can have. I had them.
Mhm.
And in my 20s, I always met it by surprise, unknowingly. I didn't even, I knew the stats were out there. I knew it was common, like a common stat for 1 in 5 people that have STIs, 1 in 5 women have fibroids, all of those things. And I was just like, well, yeah, I mean, I know it's out there. I don't think it's me. And every time it was me. Um, and I was like, well, I'm that
You
stat.
were the one.
I'm the one. And it wasn't until my 30s where I really was like, I had a fantastic OB actually at that moment. And she really helped me understand. First of all, she didn't make me feel ashamed
Mhm.
or belittled for not knowing these things or having these things happen to me, quite frankly. And she set me out on this journey of really empowering myself and really advocating for myself through education,
Mhm.
and really understanding ultimately what it is happening to my body and what it needs. And ironically, in my 30s, that was, the way I found that is through the tools that our Planned Parenthood product and innovation team had built. So, I went to our website at that time. A dear friend of mine was working with Planned Parenthood to launch their period and birth control tracking app, Spot On. I downloaded it, I used it, and the my sexual and reproductive health journey in my 20s is significantly, or now I'm outside of we don't have to talk about my age, but but in my 30s, it was completely different. I was knowledgeable. I met that moment, and I was proactive in the journey, and the outcomes have been much better for me. And I think all of that is because of the opportunities and the tools that Planned Parenthood provided me and the services that they, fight for and things like that. And so for me, what brought me into, this role, particularly at the beginning, was that I was their patient. I was the user of their digital products. And it drew me in because it felt very natural for me to come in, because I really understood the user. And that's generally how we build really good product. Nothing is better than the person that needs the product itself to say whether that product is good or not, right? Um,
Exactly.
and I think that's been like the key to my success in both staying at Planned Parenthood, but really building a portfolio of really strong, successful products. Um, is that we've been human-centered since the beginning. I build products in that sort of philosophy and mindset. And the team that we bring on also works in that journey. I think, our CEO, Alexis, always says it's not an accident that you end up at Planned Parenthood. It is very
Mhm.
much everyone has their sort of personal journey that brings
Right.
them or, glues them back to the mission. And I'm no different than that. that sort of narrative. So yeah, I mean, all of it came from my own personal journey, being grateful that I had those opportunities, being grateful for the products that we build. And, taking that experience and making products in a human-centered way is how we all sort of thrive in our product and innovation team and in the org,
That is
quite frankly. So
absolutely. And that's so incredible. And I think what you were really speaking to of how you have experience being an end user and what an incredible lens that kind of gives you where you almost get to see both sides of the coin a little bit with the work that you're doing now. I'm so curious. I know you had mentioned really, it seems like such a core tenet of the work that you do and the products that you kind of push and how, like you mentioned, is all kind of human centered, patients or users are really at the core of it. Are there any other ways that you kind of approach the work within you that you do within the organization? I would imagine that that is definitely, one of the really important ones, but I'm curious if there's kind of any other philosophies or things that you are kind of bringing in with you as a creator when you were a user.
yeah, I mean, I think for us, one thing that we think about when we build product, and certainly how we, build movement as well, quite frankly, is we think about the stories, right? And so a
Yeah.
lot of that is built upon a lens of always talking to a demographic that one we both want to serve and one we're always overrepresenting. So I've talked about this in a lot of stages that I've been on, which is something simple as user research. So when
Mhm.
we're building a product, if we know for certain that the product or feature that we're building is for a specific community in mind,
Yeah.
what we oftentimes do in our user research is we recruit members of, a diverse set of demographics. So
Yeah.
diverse in terms of states,
Mhm.
in the states they live in, whether they're in rural and suburban areas, as you all know, and folks that are familiar with women's health, the facilities or services that are available in rural spaces are quite different than urban and dense spaces as well, right? We think about age, we think about race, we think about profession as well. And
Mhm.
whenever we're building a specific feature that we know is, for example, specifically for a teen or specifically for someone in a particular life experience, we bring our user research in and we over index on those community members because it's really for them. And we kind of what we call is I'm sure most people are familiar with like a trickle down approach. So,
Mhm.
build from the top up. And what we often do is do a trickle up approach. So we build for the communities that we know need this the most, but are least representative, and we over index and bring them in user research in many ways. Our goals are very much defined and thought about in terms of, a perfect example that I know is really common in our conversations is around maternal health. And so
Right.
there are particular communities that and in particular spaces in the United States that we see demographically and through data
Mhm.
where that is most concentrated. And we make sure that in user research, we over-index it. When we pilot the feature, we're over-indexing on that. And we're really focused on niche communities. And even though we are an organization that sees, our digital traffic is about 200 million visits a year, and we have 600 clinics and we see 2 million. So people, but that can very easily become very templated, very sort of like, we kind of make, you don't want to, but in specific ways, we make some overall generalizations, but in very particular ways, we're very specific with what we want and what we want to see. So I think that's been, from a product perspective, that's unique.
Definitely.
In the 18 years that I've done product, I don't think that's how I've been able to approach problems that way. But that
Mhm.
is just the awesomeness that Planned Parenthood and that lens of being mission driven brings. And it's also inspired by the movement too. So if you talk to lots of people in the advocacy space, they do a lot of like local. They target local communities, and they're looking more in a niche level rather than broad strokes too. So a lot of that overlaps into the technical work that we do, which is very fascinating and interesting.
That's incredible. Yeah, it really seems like just the heart is behind every decision and every product. And now my favorite question, because I was so excited to ask you this. I know there's probably so many, and I know you don't want to, you can't pick just one, But is there a specific just product or initiative, something that you launched relatively recently or in the past that you're just particularly proud of? I know there's so many that are within that umbrella, but would love if you could maybe give us an
Yeah.
example.
Okay, Nina, that's tricky. You're asking like your
Yeah,
favorite
your favorite
child.
child.
Yeah, I will certainly not tell you my favorite child or favorite product, but I can maybe I can name some of the things that have, we've talked about and go into detail. I will say the thing that I'm most proud of, like overall, is just the impact that we've made. So the best thing about working at Planned Parenthood is you look at scale and engagement and those numbers as well, just as you would in a for-profit organization. But the ability to zone in and focus in on like, these are the humans we've helped. And in the long run, this is the impact we made. Like that's the story that I think it has been the best thing, the best experience in working in product and innovation at Planned Parenthood. With that, I will also still not get to the point where I'm just saying the one thing that makes that help. But maybe I could do like some top line, like four things that I think have been under my purview that I feel like, they've been both media darlings, but been very near and dear to the team.
Yeah.
Starting with the first one is when I first started at Planned Parenthood, we built out an abortion service locator. So that's the ability for someone to be able to put in their zip code, their age, when was the first day of their last period, and we're able to give them information very quickly, things that they would have to discover much later throughout their journey and kind of provide it up front. So first we tell them, by the way, this is how many weeks pregnant you are. Second thing we tell them, here are the policies you need to keep in mind based on where you are. We
Yeah.
provide them options of like, what are your options? Do you need a medical or surgical, or do you have options for both? And then
Right.
we provide them, through a lot of fancy JavaScript, the ability to pinpoint here's the nearest clinic to get you to the place that you need to do to make the decisions in a timely manner. So I think in this particular moment, that's been very meaningful. We built it, many years ago, but has been incredibly profound in this particular world. I think, there is no call that I haven't been on that I haven't mentioned our media darling brew. That's our little boo. It was built in 2019 and it's our AI powered chatbot. So we've been in the AI space, a nonprofit with like very little money.
Incredible.
Yeah, for 6 years. And we built this cute little avatar that allows users to anonymously ask questions about their sexual health and an inclusive, stigma-free way. And we've garnered, like annually we get almost 3 million conversations to Rue.
Wow.
Yeah. The third one I'll say is spot on. Spot on. I mentioned like as a user before I came on to Planned Parenthood, I use Spot On, our period and birth control tracking app. And it changed the way I had a relationship with my body. So on a personal level, I love that. And then, lately what I think has been unique in the past 2 years, we've on the innovation team, we've pivoted from building in-house products and really thought about partnership models. And so it has been awesome in terms of like a really buffering up our sort of professional space in the innovation world of like really taking bigger risks and partnering with startups that are in the pre-seed round and working with them to help them build out like the product that they wanted to build and integrate them into our digital ecosystem, into our clinics. And there have been a few startups. I mean, I'll name a few. We've worked with folks from like Autonomy, which anonymously matches abortion patients with funds that they would need that they do not have to get the service that they need, to working with Poppy Seed, which helps folks in their pregnancy through postpartum phases get virtual and in-person doula support. It's mostly focused on the Black community and built by, a Black co-founder that's bringing in Black doulas. And I feel like that has just been such a humble learning. And I'm very excited to monitor that pilot alongside them. So I think it's just been from a person that led building products to someone co-developing has been a fantastic, humbling experience in the sense that there are so many fantastic innovators out there in the world, and that do things much better than we do. And it's just been awesome to, make 1 + 1 equal truly like 9 or 22 in the space. So that has just been a really cool way to mature innovation at Planned Parenthood too. I just named 4. I think I'll stop there. So
No, that's I want to keep saying just keep going. I mean, they all sound incredible. And it's amazing to see. I can only imagine how incredible it is to see not only just kind of the launch, the maturation of the work that you all are collectively doing, but the real impact that it's making. Especially since, like you mentioned, you yourself were kind of a user as a way to start the journey. That's so amazing. I want to ask a little bit more. Because I was curious about technology, but when you mentioned kind of the work that you are doing and really how AI has been in the space for Planned Parenthood for quite some time, I'm
yeah.
so curious around your sentiments with just what technology looks like. How are you kind of seeing or thinking about it from like an accessibility and affordability standpoint? What does kind of the future of tech look like for you? Would just love your
Yeah.
overall thoughts.
Um, by the way, I would love like audience thoughts too if they have it. I'm going to answer from my Planned Parenthood and just like my personal perspective as well, which is, I think the future of tech is hybrid. In innovation, we have been bullish and said, tech will drive a lot of healthcare, and that didn't work. And there are places where we were saying only, in-person ways or with a human is the best way to manage it. That also didn't work. But when we find this sort of magic, like unicorn sort of recipe of figuring out the right balance of how human it needs to be versus tech, and in some places in this like user journey or patient journey, it can be imbalanced, but I think the future will never be just anything technical. I think the future will always be led with empathy, more so now. It's interesting because I feel like when I first started in Planned Parenthood, I think the way we were looking at care was like the best of, like making sure that like the top-notch publications, the top-notch
Right.
talent was coming in. And I think where in the space we're sitting in, it's really, and even you see this in the way that people are consuming or thinking and making decisions about their healthcare, like small things, people are thinking about empathy much more and cultural competency so much more. And so, people that we have seen were, top notch have terrible reviews. And so that hurts, the way that the healthcare system works.
Yeah.
But it also is a great pivot into making sure that we build and bring in people that really understand humans first. Because I think what I have learned as a technical person coming into a healthcare organization is that it's important to be it's important to build trust in the space.
Absolutely.
And it's less important to get things from a binary perspective or a data-driven perspective right first. I think the trust happens first, and then the data-driven just kind of elevates it. And so I think that continues to retain like my thesis in terms of things that we've seen that trends are following and going. And like the tech that works for us has always been, like a period tracking app. It's only as good as the user inputs it. Rue is a great conversation starter, but it's always solving problems together with a sex ed educator that it hands most conversations off to. So it's this combination that's really working. And as I mentioned, the startup of like the in-person and virtual doula support, both of those are helpful with one another, but it's whenever they do this like perfect dance is when it works actually. So yeah, the future of healthcare is hybrid for me. That's my trend.
That's incredible. And based off of the comments that I'm seeing and all of the emojis and reactions that are coming on, it seems like that is a view that is very well shared. And frankly, I wholeheartedly agree with you as well. And so I think it's so really incredible kind of what you're painting as kind of like the dance or the marriage between these things and really leading with empathy. I think that was also very powerful when you said that. I feel like that's definitely something that resonated with a lot of people as well. I also kind of wanted to ask you a little bit around, I'm kind of curious, in your view, are there any, you know, particular areas of women's health that may have been or maybe a little bit unexplored, or just areas where you see kind of a lot of excitement or interest kind of going forward?
Yeah, this is going to be a little, I don't know, surprising. I don't know if it's contradictory, but surprising. But I think one thing that we have been exploring from the innovation perspective is kind of turning like the conversation around women's health to not make it be such that it's the women's responsibility. So we're looking at things like male contraceptives. And this is a play not only on making sure that people understand that the decisions you all make is it's like everyone makes those decisions together, right? And so I think there's like a message in that. I think there's also, you know, safeguards put in terms of really thinking about the reproductive rights space in terms of like an advocacy play as well. So we're particularly intrigued by like services and innovation happening in spaces where there's a position and there's opportunity for growth, quite
Mhm.
certainly in specific services that open up women's health to not only women, and
Yeah.
but also serve women as well. So I think that's something that we feel like is really interesting. Again, also would be interested in hearing of, I don't know if others or you, Nina, have any thoughts there, but that's something, you know, from the lens that we sit in, is particularly interesting to us in this moment.
I love, and something you said, I agree with that too. And something you said was just already so impactful to me, of really around kind of the shared decision making and really taking the onus off of one particular party, to really hold so much of the weight of just not only the accessibility and the getting of whatever, but even just the
Right.
onus
Yeah.
of the decision making behind all of that. I think that's really I wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's funny, I didn't even really think about it that way until you were speaking to it. But I think there's something so powerful there around like democratizing just the decision-making aspect of
Right. Yeah.
reproductive health.
Yeah, I mean, and also there's definitely like a revenue play there if you look at like the
Totally.
growth of startups and like which ones are fielding a lot of revenue. There's also there's a conversation there. Of course, I'm not well versed in it as someone speaking on a nonprofit, but I think that also comes into play in the conversation in a very real way. So yeah.
That's incredible. And I do want to get to, we have some great audience questions, but I really want to get to, I'll just kind of get through some of them. But one of them, because I'm also very curious as well, really around, I think, as you were talking about a lot of the different tools and apps that you all have been working on, there's a good amount of them. I had no idea they even existed. And so kind of one of the questions really is around like the marketing plan. How do you kind of get people to just know the breadth of offerings that are even provided by Planned Parenthood, that
Yeah.
communication piece.
I mean, I think people know a particular part of Planned Parenthood and what it plays, and that's actually an important part, and we don't want to take away from that narrative for certain. A lot of it has to do, as any sort of healthcare organization thinks about, it's a play around meeting that community where it's at. So that can come in forms of going back to this hybrid role of like, we've really thought about ways that we can connect in subcultures. So for
Mm.
example, um, I don't know if many of you know this, but like at Planned Parenthood, we have a lot of relationships with religious communities, and I think that's a really good space to introduce you know, the services we provide. I think there's also a lot to talk about in like the younger audience too, which is like what are the subcultures that are happening there that we organize around. There's always like digital ways that we could do it, like conversations like this is one way. And a lot of opportunities to be in social media and media in general. So it's a fine balance of doing all of that and meeting the audience where they're at in both like digital, through digital means, through like traditional forms of media and unique ways of connecting with communities where it's authentic. What we've, you know, and I've been here for 7 years, like we continuously do this sort of research of like, where are people, you know, getting influenced about their sexual health decisions. A lot of it based on communities is like with families, like at salons, in at church. So it's in these like unique tarot card readers also, like just all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
places, right? Like I am so into that, by the way. That could be
Love it.
another conversation. But like,
Definitely.
we all sort of garner ways that we're trying to figure out really tough things that we can't really have. Sexual health is not something that is a topic that you can openly have with everyone. So I think there are pockets where people feel safe and included. And, as I mentioned, it could be anything from the church to the salon to, a tarot card reader. So things like that are things that we're looking at and figuring out what are the subcultures and niches that we can connect to in an authentic way to kind of have this open conversation. And then there's like these traditional forms of very broad national level lens marketing tactics that we continue to do as well. So it's macro and micro that we're aiming at. Um, but I think this is all blended in with like making sure that people know us for what we think is important first and
Right.
foremost. And so trying to figure out that balancing act in a particular way is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of what you were saying around obviously kind of the broader narrative, but really the meeting people where they're at, I think is so, so important. So I love I think there's whether it is a tarot card or social media or your friends or
Yeah.
what have you. I mean, it is so fascinating to really see just kind of the different avenues, like you were saying, where there's already trust there. So I think that is so incredible and so powerful. We have a bunch of another amazing questions. We definitely need to have you on for a part two, Ambreen. But I really want to end with, I think, one of my favorite questions. I mean, this has been such an enlightening conversation. Would love if we can end, if you have any just broader career advice, words of wisdom, life words of wisdom, just maybe anything either a mentor told you or that you picked up that you want to share with us today.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I have so many thoughts about this, but I will name that I just recently went to South by Southwest and there was this fantastic talk from, I believe she's the CMO of TikTok. If not, I will write you back, Nina, and tell you who it is. But this person had profound advice. She basically said that your career, anyone's career, everyone's career is actually at some point not going to be fair. And you need to like
Mm.
figure out places where you have a game plan for where it can be. And I think that's, I thought about that. Like at first I was like, that's not a very, I wish it was more like Kamala who says like, I eat no for breakfast. But I think what, the heart of what she's saying is that it's always going to be a surprising journey and you always want to be prepared for how you can combat that. And I think that's a very similar way of what Kamala is saying, but in sort of like an upside down way of saying that, which I think is really interesting. And that's both in both angles of like Kamala saying I eat no for breakfast versus,
Yeah.
this other angle. It's really just this concept of being resilient and, really thinking about ways that really speaks to your truest self. And I feel like, why I stayed at Planned Parenthood is a very easy thing for me to say because it comes from my own life experience. Um,
Definitely.
and like working at Planned Parenthood is also there's one, we have no shortage of obstacles. So it does take resilience and grit to get from A to the end line, right? Or maybe A to B to, F.
Totally.
And I think about that for my career as well, too, which is like, there are moments where it doesn't feel like it's the right thing, but you'll get there if you are resilient and like the pathway to it. So the message more is around grit and resilience, but in many different ways it's been said by many amazing women. And I feel like that is the most truest form of like what brings me to work and why I've stayed here at Planned Parenthood too. So
That's
yeah.
I love that. That's what a great advice. And kind of just speaking to the resiliency, I think especially as just given the world, given just our own individual career journeys, I feel like that is definitely a good skill just to continue to envelop and embody. So I love that you kind of had shared that with us. Thank you so much, Ambreen, for an amazing
Yeah.
conversation. We already have people wanting you to have your TED Talk. She
Oh
will
God.
be in our April Hit Lab Symposium. We really appreciate you taking the time to just chat with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. You're awesome. And I love all the hearts and hearts back to everyone else. Really appreciate this time. Bye.
Thank you so much. Make sure you join
Yeah.
us next time for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to thank our sponsors as well as one last huge shout out to our incredible guest, Ambreen. We will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.